Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'll be showing you how to make an empire style line, slip dress, nightwear, whatever you want to call it. Let's get started. First, trace your front bodice block. I've gone ahead to mark out my bust radius, which is about 3 inches all round in a circle, and at my shoulder point I'm going to find the midpoint of my shoulder and connect that to my apex point. At the top of that line I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides of that line, and I'm going to connect that with a curve to the apex point. At my center front on my bust line, I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch on both sides of that line, and I'm also going to connect that to the apex point with a straight line. At the under bust, I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch also on both sides of the dart leg. And I'm going to use my curve to connect that point also to the 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to extend that line downwards to the dart leg on the waistline. Now I'm going to connect my under bust radius to the side seam with a straight line, and from that point I'm going to connect with a curve to the center front. There's no special measurement needed for this, but you can measure however you want it to be. At the top of my radius I'm going to extend that line by 1/4 of an inch upwards, and I'm going to connect that to the side seam. But before I do that, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch inwards from the side seam, and I'm going to connect that 1/2 inch to the waistline. From one leg of the dart, I'm going to go up by 1 inch, and I'm going to connect that 1 inch to the 1/4 of an inch I marked earlier on. And also connect that point to the center front. Once that's done, you're done with the top part of your bodice, and we're going to move ahead and work on the lower part of the dress. Here I'm just going ahead to mark out the length of my dress, which is about 33 inches. I'm going to mark that down and square a line from the center front towards the side seam. And from the waistline I'm marking downwards 10 inches, which is my measurement from my waist to hip. I'm going to square that line towards the side seam, and on that line I'm going to mark 1/4 of my hip measurement. Then I'm going to use my curved ruler to connect those points together, and I'm going to use a straight line to draw from that point to the hem. At the hem, I'm going to use my curved ruler to curve that line towards the center front. This will help the dress have a nice flow to it. Then I'm going to extend my dart line towards my hip, and I'm going to extend that line by 7 inches. You can make it 5 inches if you want, but I'm doing 7 inches. Now at the empire point, I'm going to connect the contour line from the empire point to the 7-inch that we created. Now this is going to create more excess around the waistline, but that doesn't matter because it's going to be a free dress. What you want to fit properly is the empire. So I'm going to connect that line to the dart 7 inches at the dart leg, and I'm going to cut out my patterns, separate my empire piece from the rest of the bodice. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and mark my notches, separate, indicating the front and the back, and then go ahead and cut out my pattern pieces. Once I've cut out my pattern pieces, I'm going to take the measurement for the rest of my bodice. This will help, and write that down somewhere. This will help me when I make the strap to determine the length of my strap. Once that's done, I'm just going to go ahead and close my contour lines. So I'm slashing at the center front and at the empire point, and I'm going to tape that center front line. Once that's done, I'm going to separate my pattern pieces. And now to correct that line, I'm just going to place a piece of paper underneath that pattern piece and glue that down and connect the line back to the main pattern. Now when you do this, try not to add too much excess to that piece you're about to connect. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead, cut out the excess and label this pattern A. So this will be my empire piece A, and the other piece will be the empire piece B. Here I'm just going ahead to cut out the rest of my contour, and then I'm going to close the bust dart. But before I do that, before I slash through it, I'm going to connect that bust dart to the apex point. And I'm going to connect slash to the apex and close that dart. Once that's done, you're done with your empire pieces. You can go ahead and add your seam allowances to that and set that aside. Now I'm going to cut out the rest of my front pattern piece. Once that's done, I'm going to extend my dart line towards the hem, and I'm going to slash through that line. I'm slashing through it to close the dart at the empire because I don't want to sew any dart there. So I'm going to slash one leg of the dart, close the empire, and then it's going to open at the hem of the dress. Now when you open this, it's going to add more excess to the bodice of the dress, which is fine because we want to be able to get in and out of the dress without any zip closure or buttons. Once that's done, you're done with your front pattern. Go ahead, add your seam allowances to that, and we'll move on to work on the back pattern. Now working on the back, I've traced out my back pattern piece, and I'm just going ahead to mark 5 inches from the shoulder line and connect that line from the center back towards the side, and I'm going to extend my dart line to that line and connect my dart legs to the top of that line like this. At the side seam, I'm going inwards by 1/2 inch, and I'm going to connect that 1/2 inch to the waistline. Now for the lower part of the dress, we're repeating the exact same thing we did for the front. So I'm going to place down the length of my dress measurement, which is 33 inches. I'm going to mark that down and square line from the center back towards the side seam. And from the waistline, I'm going to mark down 10 inches, which is my waist to hip measurement, and also square that line towards the side. On that line, I'm going to place 1/4 of my hip measurement, and I'm going to connect that with a curved ruler, just like we did for the front. I'm also going to extend my dart line by 7 inches. And before I connect my dart, I'm going to take my front piece and then place that piece on the side seam of my back, just so I'm sure that the side seam of both pieces will match when it's time for me to sew them together. At my center back, I'm going up from the waistline by 3 inches because I want a deep cut at the back, and I'm going to connect my side seam to the center back. Now at the center back, I'm going to go inwards on my style line by 2 inches and downwards from the waistline also by 2 inches and connect those points together. This will be a separate panel because I'm going to add a lace detail at the back of my dress. Once that's done, I'm going to connect my dart line to the contour line at the top of my style line. Here I'm just going ahead to erase the lines I won't be needing so there's no confusion later. Once that's done, I'm going to take the measurement of my shoulder to where my style line is, record that down and add it to my front, because this will determine my strap, how long my strap will be. Now go ahead and cut out your pattern, but before I do that, I'm going to extend my dart line towards the hem of the dress, and like we did for the front, we're going to be slashing and spreading and closing the dart. Again, when you close that dart, it's going to open and add more excess along the waistline, which is okay. Like I said before, we need that excess to be able to wear the dress. Once that's done, I'm going to take my front pattern, match my waistline to the back pattern, and walk that pattern along the side seam of my back dress. This way I'm able to mark the length of my back dress correctly, so that when we join these two pieces together, one won't be longer than the other. Once you do that, you're going to connect those points together and then draw your new hemline. Once that's done, your pattern pieces are complete. Going to go ahead and label our pattern pieces. For the back, we're going to be cutting on fold on a bias, and also the front will be on fold on a bias. The empire pieces, the cup pieces for the empire will be cut 4 each. Once that's done, you're done with your drafting. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like it, please leave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn your post notification bell so that you don't miss any video when I upload. Thank you.